America Decides.
Here in Fulton County, the fat lady has almost sung.
With a margin that small, there will be likely a recount in Georgia.
We will not give up on this process until every last issue has been resolved.
Count every vote!
We're confident that the work is being done accurately.
Do you accept that Arizona could go blue?
No, it's not blue.
I'd like to thank my beautiful wife at home with my 6 children while I'm down here doing all of the counting. I'd like to say, hi, wife, I love you and thank you.
From CBS Election Headquarters in Times Square, this is a CBS News Election Update. 2020 America Decides. Reporting tonight, Norah O'Donnell.
And good evening and welcome once again to our special coverage. It is hard to believe it is already Friday night and still the country continues to wait and wonder who will be the next president. With each hour, more ballots are counted, and tonight the path to the presidency is becoming clearer. Tonight, Joe Biden, the former vice president, is now leading in 4 states, though still not decisively enough for CBS News to project a winner. We're standing by to hear from Mr. Biden tonight in this hour. He is expected to speak to the nation from Wilmington, Delaware, so we will bring that to you live. And like most of you, we've spent the day mesmerized by the slow, methodical work of American democracy. Want to show you these live pictures of that now. Volunteers carefully opening and counting mail-in ballots in Maricopa County, Arizona. And we've seen, and we've been also watching the vote totals grow throughout the day. Tonight, there are some new votes in Pennsylvania to tell you about, giving Joe Biden his largest lead yet in that state, more than 27,000 votes. It's also a lot closer in Georgia, where Mr. Biden's lead has now grown to 4,000 votes. A recount there is all but certain. Let's take a look at Arizona. The former vice president is ahead by just under 30,000 votes. There were a lot of votes that came in there today. And he leads by about 22,000 in Nevada. If Biden wins only those last 2 states, he could also win the presidency. Now, by our projections, at this hour, Biden leads in the race to 270 electoral votes, 253 to 213. But President Trump is vowing to fight on in the courts. And the White House says he has no plans to concede, even as his chances of being reelected are dimming. Well, our powerhouse CBS News political team is with me again tonight. And like you, we are all asking, what is taking so long? Yes. So we're going to talk in just a minute. But first, let's go over to Major Garrett and our Director of Elections, Anthony Salvanto, to walk us through what we learned in each state today.
Good evening, everyone. New vote totals tonight in Pennsylvania and Arizona. And as we will learn, this is a careful process. Anthony, we got about 92,000 votes over the course of the day in Pennsylvania. What are the trends and implications?
Okay, well, the first big headline here is that ballots out of Pittsburgh are boosting Joe Biden's lead. He's been gaining. He overtook the president this morning, and now he has got his largest lead of the day, as Norah mentioned. And so what we're seeing is that he's building up a margin. It's now 27,000 votes statewide. That, coupled with the boost that he got out of Philadelphia earlier today, that's a good trend line for him. It's not enough yet to project the race, but it's certainly a positive trend line for him.
20 electoral votes in Pennsylvania. Let's shift now to Arizona. About 100,000 votes were reported today in Arizona. Trend lines, implications.
This going the other way. We got a data dump, a bunch of ballots that Maricopa County, and that's Phoenix, counted this evening. And there, what happened was we saw that go in at 53.4% for the president. Now, that made the president gain a little bit, cut into Joe Biden's lead. Now, that's not the way Joe Biden wants to see that trend line going. So that, of course, again, not projected, but we're gonna watch that one.
Digging a little deeper into Arizona, what does the president need to do from this point forward to draw even?
I think he's at about maybe 58% of the ballots remaining.
Needed to get that.
Needed to get that. That is certainly doable, okay? But it also depends on how many ballots there are remaining. And that's been another part of what we're trying to learn today, which is going county by county. And even they are tallying up, trying to see just how many they have to count.
11 electoral votes there. Let's go north to Nevada. 6 electoral votes. Data trend lines.
Yeah. Okay. The story in Nevada is going to be Las Vegas, which is Clark County. Now here, speaking of finding ballots, telling us about ballots that they have, we learned today that they had 60,000 provisional ballots, and we can tell folks what that means, but they're added ballots that still need to be counted.
Right. A provisional ballot is legal in Nevada and many states. It is if you went to the wrong precinct by accident or you decided to vote in person as opposed to absentee. You filled out a ballot. It has a double verification process. There is nothing unusual about a provisional ballot.
That's right. But when they report them, then we have to count for them as we look at our trend lines and possible projections.
Nor that's where we are. As we learned, this is a careful, methodical process, neither fast nor slow, just what the mathematics, the votes reveal step by step.
All right, Major and Anthony, thank you so much. We should note Joe Biden is expected to address the nation tonight in the next half hour. Nicole Killian is outside the Chase Center in Wilmington, Delaware. And Nicole, we will see both the former vice president and his running mate?
Well, we're not sure about that, Nora. We do certainly expect to hear from former Vice President Joe Biden here in Wilmington at some point this evening. Delaware Senator Chris Coons tells us that he is not expected to declare victory, but instead give another update or status report on the state of the race. Campaign aides add that he will likely tout some of the progress that he's made in states like Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia. But keep in mind, most of the day, the campaign had been planning for and hoping that Biden could give a primetime speech tonight in the event the race had been called. Obviously, that has not happened. We do know the former vice president has spent a good part of today watching the returns, meeting with his aides, and spending time with his family. Nora?
Nicole Killian there in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you. A very different mood tonight at the White House. Weijia Jiang is there with how President Trump and his advisors are reacting to that. And Weijia, I understand they've been huddling for most of the day, not only at the White House, but at campaign headquarters.
They have, Nora, and sources here at the White House say the mood inside is somber. And the West Wing was empty today, with many aides not even showing up for work. They are painting a picture of a president on an emotional roller coaster that ranges from angry and disappointed that more allies are not publicly backing him up to hopeful and then sullen about all these numbers that are rolling in. CBS News has learned that the president has started telling those close to him that the math may not add up for him. Of course, that is very different from acknowledging defeat. As you mentioned, the president's advisors met at campaign headquarters today to sharpen their legal strategy, which is focused on the state of Pennsylvania while moving forward with lawsuits and requests for recounts in other states. A senior campaign official tells us they have raised $14 million for their legal defense fund since yesterday. But tonight, President Trump has a piece of advice for Joe Biden, saying the former vice president should not wrongfully claim the office of the presidency and that he could do that himself. Well, he actually did that on election night when he falsely claimed that we did win the election. Nora?
All right, Weijia Jiang, thank you. All right, we're kind of at that moment. I think now it's Friday night. Don't mean to, but here's my whiteboard tonight, which is essentially from our political team about just how many votes are withstanding. And that's why we're at the place that we're at. Give or take, this is our understanding about how many votes still exist out there, why we haven't called the race right now. And in particular, Pennsylvania, 111,000 votes is still a significant number. John?
Yeah, I mean, let's see if we can squeeze a little more out of the puzzle metaphor from Tuesday night. We're finding out there are more puzzle pieces than we thought.
There we go.
Which makes it hard to put the puzzle together.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's partially where it's difficult to know where the vote is going, because we're not sure whether it's a whole mess more of votes or a little bit less. And also in the way the funnel works of the counting, when you get to the end, you do the slightly the harder work in the counting, so it takes a little bit longer. So we said it was going to be a long process. Mm-hmm. We also said from the work we did in interviewing people involved in elections that long means they're taking their time and doing it methodically, and turns out that's all happening.
Yeah, but and yet there's this calculation that's going on from the former vice president, Joe Biden, who wants to appear tonight before the American people and speak to the American people. What are you hearing he'll say?
Well, this is designed to buck up his supporters and sort of his side of this whole equation, and not to declare victory, but to give the kind of update that he's done previously, as one aide said, with even more enthusiasm. Because the last time we heard from him, he was still trailing in Georgia, he was trailing in Pennsylvania, he was trailing in Nevada. So now that he's ahead, the they feel like he should come out and be a little more enthusiastic
and I know,
about
and
it all.
people have been glued to the TV all day. So in case you don't remember, what happened this morning was that Biden took the lead in Georgia and in Pennsylvania. So we've not yet heard from them since that occurred.
One other thing that sticks out here is, and I spoke with a Republican operative tonight who deals with a lot of Senate candidates in the president and the Trump campaign, who commented he's quite intrigued by the fact that Democrats have held pretty united over the last few days. You haven't seen a lot of sort of speaking out of turn. You haven't heard a lot of concern from anyone in the party about this. They're all laser focused on the idea that he is winning. He's getting there. Not quite there yet. You haven't heard public calls to hurry it up already, to the extent that I think a lot of Republicans expected you would from Democrats.
As Will Rogers said, I'm a Democrat. I'm not a member of an organized party. I'm a Democrat.
Right. A couple of days ago, the vice president said democracy is sometimes messy, requires patience. I'm finding that for most people, patience means 48 hours. My neighbor in 36B said, Gail, this is agonizing in the lobby. And I think voters on both sides of the aisle feel that way. You know, we were prepared to wait, but I think now that we're Friday night, certainly you thought you'd have it by the weekend. You know, to quote the great philosopher Samuel L. Jackson from Pulp Fiction, you know where I'm going, John.
Keep going.
Stay cool, honey bunny, and nobody gets hurt.
Well, but look, in the beginning, we know that we are. I think one of the most important things as we started this was recognizing that this is the most unusual election probably in American history, because we're in the midst of a pandemic and coronavirus cases that have gripped this nation and changed how we vote and perhaps who we wanted to vote for. We have candidates that have now, Joe Biden has 74 million people who voted for him, the most in history. Even Donald Trump now is over 70 million, which places him in one of the highest categories ever. I think the two of them now, both of them. So that's just
coronavirus should have brought us together. And in some respects, it tore us apart with the debate about wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, open the economy, don't open the economy. Even that has been very polarizing.
And, you know, the fact that President Trump has 70 million votes makes things very delicate for the Republican lawmakers and aides who I've been talking to all day. They say that they don't want to send a message to the president and, more importantly, to his supporters, who are by extension their supporters, that they are throwing in the towel. They want to let this process play out, especially when it's so close in every single state. So even though they see where it's headed, they know that it is going to take the president and his supporters some time to get used to this. So that's why you see them being very cautious. You know, they may be coming out and saying they don't see fraud, but you're not seeing a lot of Republicans saying the president needs to see the writing on the wall.
All eyes continue to be on Pennsylvania at this hour as those new vote tallies just came in within the last hour. Let's check in with CBS's Jerika Duncan. She is in Philadelphia, where the Biden campaign feels like it has the best shot there. And there are still tens of thousands of provisional ballots and that from military, from overseas, that are still have not been counted. Jerika?
That's right. This lead is nominal, about 27,000 votes, as you all mentioned at the top of the show. And I want to go through sort of the three areas that we're going to be watching for here in Pennsylvania, as well as the final total for the mail-in ballots that we're waiting to hear back from. But you've got the provisional ballots, which Major and Anthony talked about at the top, where maybe you bought a home, you now have a new address, you go to one place and they say, wait, these don't quite match. You get a provisional ballot, and that will be sort of cross-checked to make sure that your vote counts. 100,000 of those at least in Pennsylvania that we know of. Then you have the military votes, those overseas military votes. Those are not due until November 10th, next Tuesday. So we have to account for that as well. And we say that because this is such a nominal lead. Again, 27,000 votes that separate former Vice President Joe Biden from President Trump. And then you have, lastly, those mail-in ballots that are received from November 3rd to the 6th. There are arguments being had right now about whether or not there will be legal challenges as to whether those votes will, in fact, come into the big picture of who wins Pennsylvania in those 20 electoral votes. Nora?
All right, Jerika Duncan, let's bring in CBS News election law expert David Becker. And David, if you can, talk about what's going on right now in the state of Pennsylvania. We have about 111,000 outstanding votes, including those provisional ballots. Is there an opportunity there for President Trump to stop the vote or intervene with the courts or some sort of legal matter that could shift it in his direction?
It's really difficult to see how. A couple things to note about Pennsylvania. First of all, although the president and his supporters have made baseless claims about fraud in a place like Philadelphia, President Trump actually outperformed his 2016 performance in Philadelphia. He got more votes and a larger percentage of the vote in Philadelphia. And as we've noted, these 111,000 ballots that are coming in, they are skewing pretty heavily Democratic. And that's why Vice President Biden is now very close to exceeding President Trump's victory margin in Pennsylvania in 2016, which was about 44,000 votes. I think it's very likely he exceeds that. So then there's these two groups of ballots that come after that. One is the provisional ballots, and we think there's about 100,000 of those out there. And of those ballots, they're mostly people who had requested a mail ballot but showed up to vote in person as we got close to the election date. And if the mail ballot doesn't come in, they vote a provisional ballot, so we make sure they don't vote twice. And if the mail ballot doesn't come in, then that provisional ballot will be counted. Because of how mail ballots have skewed so much in Pennsylvania, I expect those to skew somewhat Democratic as well. And then we get to the last point, and Jericka raised this. All of these arguments about the Supreme Court and the 3-day extension for ballots to come in if they were voted by Election Day, by all accounts, the total number of those ballots throughout the state of Pennsylvania is less than 10,000. They couldn't even make up the difference now. And even though President Trump is arguing to keep them out, and he might actually want them counted, as it turns out, because he's behind, they wouldn't make up the difference even now, even if they all went one direction.
All right, David Becker, always good to have you. Thank you. Coming up, we're waiting to hear from Joe Biden. Plus, she stunned the political world by crossing party lines to endorse Joe Biden. We'll speak with Cindy McCain when we come back. You're watching CBS News 2020. America still decides. And we're waiting to hear from Joe Biden live just moments from now, and we'll bring that to you. He is leading in the state of Arizona. That's a state that no Democratic presidential candidate has won in 24 years. Joining us now is Cindy McCain, the widow of the late Arizona Senator and 2008 Republican presidential nominee John McCain. Mrs. McCain, so good to see you. We saw another 100,000 votes come in today in Arizona. Joe Biden holding his lead there. Are you convinced at this hour that he will win that state?
I really do believe he's going to win the state. It's been steady. It's been, all the things that have been talked about. The pundits are much better at this than I am. But I believe our state is changing, and I think they are going to make him their presidential nominee.
Hi, Cindy. It's John Dickerson here.
Hi.
When we were out talking, I guess it was just last week. Time has slowed a little recently. You had said that you'd gotten a little blowback from your support of Joe Biden. I wonder now that the results have come in and it looks like a very red state is going to go blue, or it's trending in that direction, if you've gotten any adverse reaction.
Well, for the most part, people have been very generous with it. I mean, some of us disagree. I have friends that I do disagree with, and they have decided to vote the other way. But it's all been a good spirit, and it's what I'm very proud of is what Arizona has actually done, and better, the voters of Arizona have decided to not only participate in this race in a major way, but to really make their voices heard. And that just makes me so proud for Arizona. Really does.
Mrs. McCain, the fact that you're smiling makes me think that you're feeling pretty good about how it's going so far. But I've heard many Republican women say, listen, I didn't leave the Republican Party. The Republican Party left me. Is that how you were feeling?
I was feeling that way a little bit. But with that said, remember, for me, it was about the candidates. And I just believe that Joe Biden was and is a better candidate and will make a remarkable president. And for those of us that have the freedom and celebrate democracy, it's wonderful to be able to make that choice.
Cindy, you made the choice to support Joe Biden. Would you ever make the choice to serve in a Biden administration should it come to that? We're way away from that, but should it come to that, would you?
Well, really what I want to do is help not just the administration, but our country heal. And I would like to be helpful in any way I can with regards to bringing people together, making sure that we find common ground with one another and that we heal from all of this. And most importantly, heal from this pandemic. My family's been affected just like millions of other families. And like all of us, I would like to make sure that our families are healthy again. and that we can feel safe.
What do you think your husband would have said about your endorsement? Mrs. McCain, you've never done this before. What do you think he would have said or thought?
I think he would have been proud. I wouldn't have done this if I had thought John would have been thinking it wouldn't have been the right thing for me to do. We've known Joe and Jill for so many years, and it's what an opportunity to not only know a presidential candidate like we do and be able to vote for them for the highest office in the land. I mean, there's nothing more special than that.
When you hear that President Trump has no plans to concede and that there are questions about a peaceful transition of power, what concerns you?
Well, like everyone, we celebrate peaceful transition. That's who we are as Americans and as our country. And I believe as we get down the line here that I really hope and pray that their campaign does the right thing.
Well, Cindy McCain, so good to have you on this evening. And as the eyes of Americans in the world, also on the state of Arizona, as looking for what could be a big change in your state and some other states across this country as well. Thank you again. Best to you.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And still ahead, Joe Biden speaks as he inches closer to the presidency. We'll have an update on the vote totals in some of those key battleground states. You're watching CBS News 2020, what we're now calling America Still Deciding. Welcome back to CBS News election headquarters. Tonight, Joe Biden's leading in Georgia by just about 4,000 votes. It appears to be headed for a recount there. Mark Strassman joins us tonight from Atlanta. And Mark, the count goes on. Tell us what still is remaining out there.
Well, the 4,000 vote lead, let's talk about that first of all. It feels like such a relative number right now in this state. 4,000 must seem mighty fragile if you're a Biden supporter, and it must seem like a high hill to climb if you're a Trump supporter. The Secretary of State, Republican Brad Raffensperger, has already said that there is going to be a recount here. He pointed to the closeness of the race and its significance on the national map. There are also roughly 25,000 ballots still to be counted. They're a combination of overseas, military, provisional, and absentee ballots. How long that's going to take is anybody's guess. What I can tell you, Nora, is that this process here, as in many states, has taken longer consistently than election officials have predicted.
All right, Mark Strassman there in Atlanta for us. Thank you. We should note that CBS News characterizes Arizona at this hour as leaning toward Joe Biden. The Trump campaign believes it still has a chance to win there, where more than 240,000 votes remain to be counted. CBS's Jamie Yuccas is in Phoenix for us tonight. And good evening, Jamie.
Good evening, Nora. You can see there are still people here working to get those thousands of ballots counted. Here in Maricopa County, by our estimation, there are a total of about 92,000 ballots left to count at this point. They are going to continue to work throughout the weekend. And while President Trump picked up votes, the margin, as you've been talking about, is narrowing. Now, we did a little math here, so bear with me. But in order to win, he would need to get above, we believe, 57 to 58% of the vote that dropped tonight in Maricopa County. It appears that this latest drop of votes, he only picked up about 54.9%. So it is going to be very, very tight to look at. And as we said, there are still plenty of other votes throughout the state of Arizona, hundreds of thousands. So we will have to continue to watch this throughout the weekend. It's going to be very, very tight. And as I said, they hope to finish tomorrow, but if they don't, they'll be back Monday. They've been working since October 20th to get all those early votes and mail-in votes processed. So they want to give them a break on Sunday if they can. Nora?
Jamie Yuccas, thank you. And I just want to clarify, because there was another 100,000 votes that came in today from Maricopa County. And so just to be clear, it's 178,000 that still need to be counted out of Arizona. It's hard to keep up with the numbers, as they keep coming in, but they are trying to do their best job there.
One of the things that takes a little bit of time in Arizona is if you get a mail-in ballot and you decide not to mail it, because some people just want the fun of going to the election site but not waiting in line. You drop it off. It takes longer to process because they have to open it and match the signatures. They take special training to match the signatures and then process that ballot. So that's in part what takes a little bit longer than if you just just vote on voting day or mail it in beforehand.
There they are on the political panda cam again tonight.
You call it the panda cam because that's what we usually have at the Washington National Zoo.
But Ed, you have to really lean in very closely to see people where they're counting.
Tell you, if you're bored and you need something to do, you can watch those guys.
But how amazing that in Georgia they've now counted nearly 5 million votes, and these two candidates are only separated by 4,000.
Yeah, that Georgia story to me, Nancy, is one of the most intriguing. People are bowing down to Stacey Abrams tonight. You know, she said that she lost by 55,000 in her race back in 2018. She said she sat Sheva for 10 days and said, I'm going to get to work. And she is certainly more than delivered when it comes to Georgia. People are giving her a lot of credit. Hillary tweeted tonight, thank you, Stacey, thank you. Viola Davis says, you know, my heart goes out to you, Stacey Abrams, thank you again. She's getting a lot of credit for, and true Stacey Abrams form, she's crediting other people who worked with her in her Fair Fight initiative.
And they've all got to get ready for two unprecedented special elections in January, so they're going to have to rev up that machine again.
Yeah, she's done something extraordinary there.
All right, there's a lot more ahead. We're awaiting Joe Biden's speech from Wilmington, Delaware, and we'll bring that to you live. You're watching CBS News 2020, America Decides. And you're looking live at pictures of Wilmington, Delaware, where tonight we are expected to hear from the former vice president being joined by his running mate, Senator Kamala Harris. And Ed, I know you've been in touch with the campaign all day. Why do they feel it's necessary for us to hear from Biden every single night?
So I think this is a preview potentially of what a Biden presidency would be like, a little more selective and scheduled in when and how we hear from him. It's designed to be a real sort of counter messaging kind of move to make it a little more formal, a little more reverent, I guess you could say. In this case, they believe that until it's settled, they want the nation and the world to see him and to see him doing presidential-like things by standing in front of the flags and giving formal addresses and having Kamala Harris flank him as his running mate, and his vice president-to-be, trying to get Americans in the mindset of him being in charge.
And certainly earlier this morning when Joe Biden took the lead in Pennsylvania, his campaign was feeling more confident that perhaps a decision could be made today, that they would win those 20 electoral votes that would put them over the edge, that the networks would call. And yet what we're witnessing, though, is a slower vote count. So I want to bring in our elections and survey director, Anthony Salvanto, to just break down exactly what's happening in Pennsylvania. Yes. Why do we still have those remaining ballots?
Well, slow indeed, but some would say slow, some would say deliberate. It appears from our reporting that you go county by county, and these elections officials are trying to tabulate and do it right. Now, let me zoom in on Pennsylvania, because I want to put this all in context for everybody. When we say that there are tens of thousands of ballots outstanding, that's meaningful in a really close race. So, for example, here, what you're seeing in Pennsylvania, if I say I estimate there's 86,000, it sounds like a lot, but that is almost all of the ballots. So they are through almost all of them. The difference being that when the margin is so razor thin, you have to go county by county and not just find out what kind of county it is, find out whether it's a mail ballot on which Joe Biden did well or an election day ballot on which the president tended to do well, but also find out just exactly how many there are so that you know how many the trailing candidate might need in order to catch up in any given county.
And what percentage of the remaining or outstanding vote would President Trump need to win in order to overtake Joe Biden's lead?
This shows you it's 63% as of now. Think of it like a pie, and you've got to get the majority of it. How much of it you need depends on how far behind you fall. But there's one tricky part of this, even though that sounds like a large number, and it's certainly larger than the statewide number that the president has been getting, and that is, could he get 63% on the kind of ballots that are outstanding? that is possible.
I want to show everybody just a second that what we're seeing now, this is the motorcade of former Vice President Joe Biden that is arriving at the Chase Center in Wilmington, Delaware, where we are expecting to hear from him shortly. When you become a candidate for president of the United States, whether you're the Democrat or a Republican, certainly you have a very large Secret Service contingent around you. And so that's why look at the length of this motorcade. If you've never seen a candidate's motorcade,
very impressive.
It's very impressive. It has a number of Secret Service agents. There's usually an ambulance. The president's motorcade is even bigger than this.
Yes.
But that's because our country looks to whoever might be the future leader and either party and protects either one of them, given certainly that there can be threats against either one of them.
And Nora, you get no red lights, so wherever you need to go, you can get there lickety-split.
Very true.
Quick, that's right.
He'll
Yeah.
be on the stage
control.
very soon.
Yeah. We lost Anthony. He's going back to work. But
he's still I'll come back.
Okay, Anthony.
There's no new vote coming.
Hit and refresh. Okay,
right to go back.
The 63% in Pennsylvania. Just putting that in context, you were saying it depends on where it comes from and what kind of ballot it is. But the president, so far in what's been coming in, hasn't been getting anything close to 63%.
That's correct. And part of when we project a race, we're looking at that trend line as well. So the trend line has not been favorable to him. Having said all that, if these are election day ballots, there are some counties where he got that kind of percentage.
And then it's a question of how many of them there are.
And then it's a question of how many there are. We really get the sense that election officials are wrestling with all the changes that took place this year in how people vote. People had to manage that process, and also elections officials had to manage that process. And we've sort of seen this coming all fall, but it's really manifesting itself.
But Anthony, looking at the numbers that you're showing us now, why are you uncomfortable saying either leaning or likely at this point for Joe Biden in Pennsylvania?
It's the margin and the trend line. It's the margin and trend line. So long as I can't yet determine exactly what kind of ballots there are out there, it's harder to ascertain exactly whether the president could catch up. You know, is the trend line favorable to Joe Biden? Yes. But until right now, in fact, until only about 15 minutes ago, that margin was so slim. Now it's starting to build as Pittsburgh is coming.
I'm not rushing you. I just think it's good for
No, I
to
get
see your
look,
process.
Look, everybody in America wants to know when this is going to
Just push the arrow back so we can see the tally again. We know 63% of the vote, and I think Nancy Cordes has a question.
Hey, Anthony, President Trump won this state by about 44,000 votes in 2016. How possible is it for Joe Biden to reach or exceed that kind of margin?
Yeah, look, if Joe Biden wins this, he could win it by 20, 30,000 votes in some models, maybe higher than that, frankly. You know, if you look at it, you look at where the votes are still outstanding, we've mentioned Pittsburgh a number of times. That's a rich Democratic vote area. So that could add to the tally, and then we'll see what happens on the provisionals.
Do you mean in addition to the 27 he's up now?
No,
20
total.
more or total? Okay.
Yeah. At the end of the day, some models would have that. Again, this if he wins, if these trend line holds, then that would project out to maybe 30, maybe 40,000 vote margin.
But again, just within the last hour, we saw Joe Biden's lead expand.
That's
because
right.
there were additional votes that came in from Allegheny County, which is Pittsburgh. 7,300 went for Joe Biden, about 1,875 for Trump. So he was winning a larger proportion in Allegheny County. That is a Democratic area. That's that blue area right around Pittsburgh.
Right there. There you go.
And do you have any sense then of where the additional votes are coming from?
All over.
Yeah.
All over. And there's a lot of, as you well can see, there's a lot of red counties out there. And that's what you have to really determine, whether or not, even if it's not a lot of them, if it's a small bit, that can start to add up. Is it likely? No, it's not likely, but it remains possible.
And Anthony, we should go ahead and just look at those other states, because if Joe Biden were to win the state of Pennsylvania, that would get him to 273. One of the other pathways is to take Arizona and Nevada, which you have shaded a color of blue there because you have them. How are we currently characterizing them, sir? Well,
Arizona is leading Biden, and the reason for that is that he has maintained a lead. However, in recent reports out of Maricopa County, which is Phoenix, Donald Trump is starting to cut into that lead. So if you're a leading candidate, you want to maintain it. You don't want to see it starting to evaporate. So that's why it's just a lead.
So it's a little bit of the opposite story of what's happening in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
So you know, there's a funny way in which this feels like a horse race. Somebody's ahead, then somebody's catching up. But in reality, we're talking about votes that are all of equal weight. And they are all, I mean, if they could all come in at the same time, it would be better. But I guess the point is the order in which they're coming in really has no bearing on the kind of ballot.
It's kind of random. It is kind of random. And let me take that analogy one step further. It's like you're watching a horse race, but you're not sure how long the track is, because eventually the ballots will run out and they'll have counted them all. But if you don't know exactly how many ballots there are, then you don't know how many lengths you still have to go.
All right, so that's Arizona. We promised everybody we'd look at Nevada because that was a very slim vote margin for Joe Biden in Nevada. He also grew his margin today, right, in Nevada, as we got another tranche of voters out of Clark County around the Las Vegas area. And so now, according to my latest numbers, my last time I looked, we've got Biden up 22,657 was my latest math.
Yeah, that's right. And here again was another story of elections officials trying to tell us exactly how many were left to count. And there again, you're sort of moving the track a little bit. It's not until you get that full counting that you can really figure out what's going on. 91% of the ballots still out there. 58% for the president to catch up. High number, higher than his current statewide. But possible.
Right. Just to remind everybody, we're about to hear from the former vice president who is going to appear there at that lectern and speak to the American people. That could happen any second. This is my whiteboard of about, according to our political desk, about how many votes are still outstanding. People want to know why we have not called the race in any of these states we've characterized, of course, Nevada and Arizona. But that's why all votes should be counted, and we can model on those. But still, there's a large number that are outstanding, including of provisional ballots. And so that's why patience is going to be our best friend.
Patience is a virtue. We all know that.
Nora, your handwriting is really nice.
Well, I wish I had gone to Catholic school. I did not, but I did grow up Catholic, so the handwriting was important. Thank you.
Yeah, the nuns
it's hard to write nicely on the whiteboard.
Yeah, but let's talk about we did not hear from President Trump today. We've not seen Vice President Pence in 3 days. They are in sort of a wait and see mode about their next step. We have some reporting from inside the campaign that there have been legal advisors to the president that have told him there is not a significant way forward in terms of a legal challenge to the votes. And so I think there is sort of if not a sense of resignation, a sense of waiting to see what happens.
Well, the blast radius of what he has said still continues. So he's, even though we didn't hear from him today, Gail asked me earlier about recounts, and he's banking some of his future on that. And so I spent a little time looking at recounts. The margin, usually in recounts, you get a couple of hundred votes maybe that change. The last real big race people may remember was the 2008 Senate race where Al Franken ran against Norm Coleman in Minnesota. Norm Coleman was ahead by a couple of hundred votes, did the recount over a very long period of time. Al Franken won. But we're still talking about an exchange in any of the races. There was a governor's race in Washington State and then a Senate race in New Hampshire. You changed 200 or 300 or 400 votes.
Because I really get the impression they're counting very heavily on the recounts, and they keep throwing out this notion of illegal ballots. Here comes the ex-vice president now, Vice President Biden approaching the podium. Kamala Harris.
My fellow Americans, we don't have a final declaration of victory yet, but the numbers tell us it's clear. Tell us a clear and convincing story. We're going to win this race. Just look at what has happened since yesterday. 24 hours, we were behind in Georgia. Now we're ahead, and we're going to win that state. 24 hours ago, we were behind in Pennsylvania, and we are going to win Pennsylvania. And now we're ahead, but we're winning in Arizona, we're winning in Nevada, and in fact, our lead just doubled in Nevada. We're on track to over 300 electoral votes, electoral college votes. And look at the national numbers. We're going to win this race with a clear majority of the nation behind us. We've gotten over 74 million votes. Let me repeat that, 74 million votes. That's more than any presidential ticket has ever gotten in the history of the United States of America. And our vote total is still growing. We're beating Donald Trump by over 4 million votes. And that's a margin that's still growing as well. One of the things I'm especially proud of is how well we've done across America. And we're going to be the first Democrat to win in Arizona in 24 years. We're going to be the first Democrat to win Georgia in 28 years. And we've rebuilt the blue wall in the middle of the country that crumbled just 4 years ago. Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, the heartland of this nation. I know watching these vote tallies on TV moves very slow, and as slow as it goes, it can be numbing. But never forget, the tallies aren't just numbers. They represent votes and voters, men and women who exercise their fundamental right to have their voice heard. And what's becoming clear each hour is that record number of Americans of all races, faiths, religions chose change over more of the same. They've given us a mandate for action on COVID, the economy, climate change, systemic racism. They made it clear they want the country to come together, not continue to pull apart. The people spoke, more than 74 million Americans, and they spoke loudly for our ticket. But while we're waiting for the final results, I want people to know we're not waiting to get the work done and start the process. Yesterday, Senator Harris and I held meetings with groups of experts on public health and the economic crisis this country is facing. The pandemic, as you also know, is getting more worrisome all across the country. Daily cases are skyrocketing, and it's now believed that we could see as many as 200,000 cases in a single day. The death toll is approaching 240,000 lives lost to this virus. That's 240,000 empty chairs, kitchen tables, and dining room tables all across America. We'll never be able to measure all that pain and the loss, the suffering that so many families have experienced. We know something about what it feels like to lose someone. And I want them to know they're not alone. Our hearts break with you. We want everyone to know on day one, we're going to put our plan to control this virus into action. We can't save any of the lives lost, any of those have been lost, but we can save a lot of lives in the months ahead. Senator Harris and I also heard yesterday about how this recovery is slowing because of the failure to get the pandemic under control. More than 20 million people are on unemployment. Millions are worried about making rent and putting food on the table. Our economic plan will put a focus on a path to a strong recovery. Look, we both know tensions are high. They can be high after a tough election, one like we've had. But we need to remember, we have to remain calm, patient. Let the process work out as we count all the votes. You know, we're proving again what we've proved for 244 years in this country. Democracy works. Your vote will be counted. I don't care how hard people try to stop it. I will not let it happen. The people will be heard. Our journey is toward a more perfect union, and it keeps moving on. In America, we hold strong views. We have strong disagreements, and that's okay. Strong disagreements are inevitable in a democracy, and strong disagreements are healthy. They're a sign of a vigorous debate, of deeply held views. But we have to remember, the purpose of our politics isn't total, unrelenting, unending warfare. No, the purpose of our politics, the work of the nation, isn't to fan the flames of conflict, but to solve problems, to guarantee justice, to give everybody a fair shot, and to improve the lives of our people. We may be opponents, but we're not enemies. We're Americans. And no matter who you voted for, I'm certain of one thing. The vast majority of almost 150 million Americans who voted, they want to get the vitriol out of our politics. We're certainly not going to agree on a lot of issues, but at least we can agree to be civil with one another. We have to put the anger and the demonization behind us. It's time for us to come together as a nation to heal. It's not going to be easy, but we have to try. My responsibility as president will be to represent the whole nation. And I want you to know that I'll work as hard for those who voted against me as those who voted for me. That's the job. That's the job. It's called the duty of care for all Americans. We have serious problems to deal with, from COVID to the economy to racial justice to climate change. We don't have any more time to waste on partisan warfare. You know, and more than that, we have such an incredible opportunity to build the future we want for our kids and our grandkids. I've said many, many times, I've never been more optimistic about the future of this nation. There is no reason we can't own the 21st century. We just need to remember who we are. This is the United States of America. And there's never been anything we've been unable to do, unable to accomplish when we've done it together. I hope to be talking to you tomorrow. I want to thank you all, and may God bless you, and may God protect our troops. Good night.
And I think this was a much different night than the former vice president expected. I think his team expected that there might be fireworks tonight and a celebration. Instead, though, however, the president issuing a unifying theme. I'm just writing some of the key words down. Yes. You know, solve problems. We're not enemies. Be civil. Let's put anger and demonization behind us. Heal.
Let the process work.
Let the process work. Optimistic about this. I mean, he is clearly trying to read what is a divided nation out there and offering a different type of message.
And this is your standard, they're just boxes you check off. So the first is you claim victory and how well everything's going for you. Then you talk about the work of the nation. Already, as Ed said, like he's the president. Then you tie everybody to the larger messages of the nation, that we're all in this together. We're not enemies. We may be competitors. I mean, this was a textbook speech. We haven't had a textbook speech for 4 years. And what he's basically trying also to do is to be quite a contrast with.
But the difference, guys, to me between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is the other night when Donald Trump claimed victory. This time, Joe Biden had numbers to back it up. And he said very clearly that the numbers tell a clear and convincing story. He also said these aren't just numbers, that these numbers also represent voters, which I thought was a very important point to make.
Just real quick, I mean, he acknowledged the record number of coronavirus cases today, 121,000 plus. But I heard one word in there, mandate. And many would argue he doesn't have that necessarily because his party did not get the majorities in the House and the Senate it expected. The Senate majority is in suspension until early January after those races in Georgia. He's going to argue that he has one. But it's going to be very difficult if Republicans have as much control of the House and the Senate as they do.
Right. Mitch McConnell said that he wanted to make Barack Obama a one-term president. There's no reason to think that he wouldn't have the exact same goal if Joe Biden was at the White House.
I just want to update everybody because I understand that there has been a new number of ballots that has dropped from Pennsylvania. I can't walk over to the wall that quickly enough. I'm not sure that it is updated, but now we're hearing that Biden's lead has extended to 28,833 votes there in Pennsylvania.
Happening while we're on the air right now in real time.
Yeah, and that's part of this. Some people may call it the trickle or the crawl of votes, but he has expanded that lead there. And we can just put up, you can see Pennsylvania has just popped up, and it looks like it may be, the data is updating in the wall there. But again, that's part of what the Biden team feels confident about, that they will win a majority, if not more, of those new votes that come in from the state of Pennsylvania. Well, our election coverage is going to continue with your local news on the CBS station, and then tomorrow on CBS This Morning, Saturday. We'll all be back tomorrow with any election developments. So for all of us, yes, John Dickerson, Gayle King, Ed O'Keefe, and Nancy Cordes and Major Garrett, I'm Norah O'Donnell at CBS News Election Headquarters.